Ohio's red tide of COVID and the final scramble for Ohio's votes. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Herb Asher, OSU political scientist, Mike Gonidakis, Republican strategist, and Jesse Balmert, State House reporter for the Cincinnati Enquirer. We'll get to politics in just a moment, but with a little more than a week before the election ends, Ohio is seeing record levels of COVID-19 spread. Day after day this week, the state topped the daily record for new cases. 38 counties are now in the red. That means they have very high exposure. Hospitalizations are also up. When asked if he planned to issue any more shutdown orders, Governor DeWine suggested they would not be effective.
What we're seeing is most of the spread is coming from people who are doing informal things. It may be in their home, it may be in their backyard, it may be getting together someplace else, and people are letting their guard down when they're with friends. They're letting their guard down when they're with family.
The spike in cases is causing school districts to change their plans. Columbus City Schools now will keep nearly all students at home until at least January. Columbus school kids were supposed to go back to school in classes in a hybrid fashion in about a week. Jesse Balmert, the governor this week, even brought out Chris Christie, a COVID survivor who's in the intensive care unit, the New Jersey governor. He pleaded with Ohioans to wear a mask, but that's where it stops. It's just pleading. There's no more state action.
Yeah, I think this really is in line with Governor DeWine's just philosophy on governing recently, which has been personal responsibility. Like, I'm going to give you this information. I'm going to tell you that you should maintain social distance and you should wear a mask and you should, wash your hands and maintain sanitary spaces. And I'm hoping you're going to follow that. And so the question is that the right policy? If it is, the numbers have not really been indicating it recently. But there's also, as he said, an issue with shutting down things like bars or restaurants or schools that maybe aren't the real cause of the problem, if it is just people getting together in too large of groups and not being cautious.
Herb Asher, this weekend, the Buckeyes are back on the field. No fans in the stadium, no tailgating on campus. But Buckeye games tend to draw these informal crowds together.
Yes. You wonder what will happen to bars, informal, impromptu tailgates. So it will be an empty stadium, but you could imagine a higher concentration of people in the campus area frequenting the bars and establishments and setting up their own outdoor tailgates or whatever.
Mike Gonidakis, why not? The governor he's pleading with folks. He's said it's really serious. Now is the time to get serious. He's asking folks to wear masks. Don't have these big group gatherings, wash your hands, stay apart. But he doesn't even threaten that we may have to lock things down again. If he were to say, look, if we don't turn this around, I may have to close down restaurants and bars, would that get his message across a little better?
I'm not sure. I think the legislature would dig their heels in if he said he was going to do a close down again of any sorts of any industry. At the end of the day, Ohioans are washing their hands. They're wearing masks. You go to Giant Eagle, Kroger, any place, you got your mask on. You can't enter Costco or Sam's Club without having a mask. So if you need to do any type of shopping, you have to have a mask on. So I think Ohioans are doing their part. It's a virus, Mike. It's going to spread. The CDC issued a study recently that said people with masks are getting COVID-19. So we can't legislate COVID-19 away. We can just do our best and manage it. And I think at the end of the day, Ohioans have sacrificed tremendously and continue to do so. And they're doing it because they want to be healthy and safe. So we're going to have to live with it. And regardless of the number of cases, the good news is deaths are down. Hospitalizations aren't spiking per se. I mean, there's over 43,000 beds in Ohio, and we're, I think, a little bit over 1,000 being used now. So we have to find a balance. We have to live our lives. And to Herb's point about campus parties, I suspect there's going to be a lot of house parties in Dublin, Hilliard, Upper Arlington for the Buckeye game this Saturday. And then next week, they play Penn State at 7:30 p.m., and the restaurants are going to be packed.
Yeah, of course, restaurants still have to stop serving alcohol at 10 o'clock, which is roughly halftime. So think ahead. Jesse Balmert, did the governor give any indication that he was thinking, we're at, even though the hospitalizations aren't going through the roof. They are at their highest level that they've been at since June, similar to what we were in March. Those are the other two big cases, big spikes in this pandemic. After those two times they came down, as the governor said, if cases don't come down after this spike, that he might have to crack down. Any indication he's even thinking of that?
He really hasn't indicated any sort of action that he would take. He has been, as you said, he's been pleading with people, he's been talking to people, he's been trying to provide examples like Governor Christie, where, it seems like Governor Christie was pretty safe and thought that he was in an area where everyone had been tested and no one was going to have the virus, but still contracted the virus anyway and was hospitalized for a period of time. So he's providing those examples for people, but there really haven't been any firm suggestions of what would happen if numbers continue in a negative direction.
Herb Asher, do you think the governor, from an appearance standpoint, he has health advisors advising him, I'm sure, but he doesn't have the state health director standing next to him like Amy Acton was back in the spring when this thing first hit. Does that hurt his messaging when he doesn't have, a physician, an epidemiologist standing right next to him every day?
Well, when it looks like he's there alone, and it looks like, as Mike said, his party wouldn't support him if he were to, in fact, try to impose more stringent measures, it does make him seem to have less of a platform. One thing to say, though, is that our governor is practicing what he preaches. So if you think leadership makes a difference, at least he can say, I'm doing this and I'm pleading with you to do what I'm doing. But the scary thing is, as cases go up, ultimately, in a matter of weeks, you're going to see hospitalizations go back up, and then you're going to see serious hospitalizations, ICUs going up, and then you're going to see ultimately more deaths. But that doesn't unfold immediately, and there really are all these lagging indicators. And so one of the questions is really, what will things look like a week from now, 2 weeks from now, and what will things look like in rural Ohio? That's one of the concerns. And of course, nationally, we're seeing more and more concerns about some of our more rural states, because the initial, problem areas were LA and New York, urban areas and all of that. And it's in those rural areas and rural states where the capacity to treat large numbers of COVID patients is really limited by, the number of hospital beds. As Mike said, we got a lot of hospital beds in Ohio, but they're not distributed, evenly across the state. So I think we'll have to watch to see what happens. But the best the governor can do now is simply be a leader and say, practice what I'm preaching, please.
And Ohio has been, really for its size per capita, one of the better stories among the 50 states. Recently, Ohio has spiked up above other states, but it has not seen the spikes that Florida, New York, New Jersey, South Dakota, Arizona has seen over the course of this pandemic. All right, now to our other big story, Ohio's role in picking the President of the United States. We'll leave the analysis of last night's debate to the national folks. So let's look at Ohio. It is still a toss-up. The latest polls, one from Rasmussen, one from Fox News, mirror each other. Joe Biden leads by 2 points in the Rasmussen poll. President Trump leads by 3 points in the Fox News poll. Both are within the margin of error, and that's where the candidates have been for months, within that margin of error. Mike Gonidakis, the polls have different methodologies. They have different organizations. Some are rated high, some are rated low, but they're very consistent. This race is a toss-up. What is it going to take for President Trump to pull it out like he did 4 years ago?
I still believe it, and I'm willing to guarantee that President Trump will win Ohio. I'll go that far, and Ohio does a good job of picking the president, so that should bode well for him. He's spending a lot of time here. Mike Pence, we just announced that the president will be in Ohio here later this weekend too. So, they're putting a lot of resources into Ohio, and it's going to bode well. Joe Biden is not here. Kamala is coming to Cleveland here soon, but Ohio still likes its retail politics, Mike, and I believe at the end of the day, the president's done a great job doing that, and he'll get the turnout, and I firmly believe he's going to win Ohio.
Herb Asher, Joe Biden had made a stop in Cincinnati a week, 10 days ago, but really has not been here very often. Will that hurt him?
Well, I think he needs to spend more time here, but obviously he's on the airwaves, he's on radio, so he has we'll call a faux presence, if you will. But look, Ohio is in play. And the last time I heard an assurance as strong as Mike's about who's going to carry Ohio was back in 2012 when Kurt Steiner and Neil Newhouse said to me, now, Herb, we don't know what's going to happen nationally, but we can absolutely guarantee that Mitt Romney, I should say, will carry Ohio. And I said, oh, okay, I'll wait till the votes are counted. And Obama won, and he won in part because of the turnout model, and he really had tremendous turnout. One of the things that I'd be interested in hearing what everybody has to say about this, the early voting is heavily Democratic. We expected that, and what happens if the coronavirus gets worse and worse, and we also have weather issues on Election Day? What happens to turnout in Ohio in areas where presumably they're relatively more Republican? The president, was really scaring people about early voting, about the U.S. Post Office, about all this stuff that's so bad with mail voting. I wonder if there is really a tactical error here in encouraging or maybe scaring some Republicans from voting early. And then if it turns out on Election Day, we're at the peak of a virus.
Yeah. Mike, what do you think? I mean, will Trump voters, could that hurt them? I'm thinking the rural Trump voter is going to come out no matter what. I think they're out there, but it's the sort of shy Trump voter in the suburbs, in the cities that like his policies but don't like him. Will they be motivated to come out under Herb's scenario?
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, absolutely, Mike. Republicans are very disciplined. A vast majority do vote on Election Day, whether it's raining or snowing or it's beautiful out like it is today. We're very disciplined, but there's a misconception, Mike, that early voting is only happening in Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. I've called friends out in Allen County, Hancock County, Mercer County. They're voting early right now, too, and their lines are just as long as they are in Columbus. And so you're seeing Republicans motivated as well to vote early. So I'm voting on Election Day. I'm a traditionalist. My wife is too. But I don't care what the weather is. I think most Republicans don't, and Democrats. This is an important election, and the two choices are very stark. So I think regardless of the coronavirus cases that keep coming out, we'll wear our mask and we'll go vote.
Jesse Balmer, I want to get some of the strategy. It seems like now the president's going to be in Circleville this weekend. So that's more central Ohio. But for the past 3 weeks or so, the campaign in Ohio has been centered from Toledo south to Cincinnati. It seems like it's like west of I-75. Why do you think that is? Why is Cincinnati, Lima, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Mike Pence is going to be, which bleeds into Ohio, and also Toledo? Why is that sort of the fertile ground for both parties right now, do you think?
Well, I think the benefit of Cincinnati is you can kind of draw into the Kentucky and Indiana markets as well. If you're up in Toledo, you can draw into the Detroit market, especially if you're talking about the auto industry. It's obviously affecting multiple states up there. So I think you're trying to get your most bang for your buck at this point in the campaign with just a couple weeks left. And those are areas where you can really do that. But Cincinnati is an area that has been Republican. Certainly there are large pockets of townships that are still heavily Republican down there, but the county in general has been moving more Democratic, maybe to a lesser extent than Franklin County, and certainly how Cuyahoga County is kind of already there. So it's an interesting battleground for the state, which is kind of a battleground for the country.
Yeah. Mike Gonidakis is finally we're getting a candidate in Central Ohio. We haven't had one really this entire cycle. Is Central Ohio lost to the Republicans?
It doesn't look good for local candidates in Franklin County. I think it's going to be a bloodbath for them outside of our county prosecutor, maybe a few judges. But, I think Troy Balderson withstood the test of time. His greatest opponent was Danny O'Connor in the past. And, I just think that the way our districts are drawn, both for the Democrats and Republicans here in Ohio, that the big surprises, there won't be any surprises. I'm rooting for Christina Hagan, but I still think Tim Ryan will pull it out, and so on and so forth.
Let's get to the congressional races. Even if there is a blue or a red wave in an election, Ohio's congressional districts are drawn in such a way to surf over that wave. But there are a couple of seats where Democrats hope for an upset. One is the one in Central Ohio that Mike just mentioned, the 12th district, where Representative Troy Balderson is wrapping up his first full term in Congress, and Democrat Elena Shearer from Delaware is hoping to unseat the Zanesville Republican. Herb Asher, what will it take? Will it take a huge Democratic wave for Elena Shearer to have any chance of winning that heavily gerrymandered district?
Yeah, it'll take a very strong Biden performance within the boundaries of that district. And one of the things Democrats are hoping for is that they will continue to improve their performance in the northern suburbs of Franklin County and make some inroads into Delaware County. One of the things that surprised people about 2016 is that Hillary Clinton, even though she lost Delaware County, ran better than Barack Obama did. And people are now thinking about, well, maybe there are parts of Delaware County, particularly the southern parts of Delaware County, where maybe in fact you're seeing the same kinds of evolution that we've seen in Upper Arlington and Westerville and Worthington and all of that. Well, there needs to be a strong Biden performance in that area, I think, for Shearer to really have a realistic chance. But I think that would be the scenario I would see.
Herb, the obvious is Elena Shearer is a woman, and suburban women have been analyzed as being a key demographic in this election that has to help her, at least in the suburbs, correct?
No, that's right. No, that's right. And look, when people get beyond just simply the horse race question about, Biden versus Trump, and they start breaking it down and looking at various voter groups, we're seeing that obviously Biden is doing very well, better than Hillary Clinton, among women, among college-educated women, and actually doing better in general among white women than in the past. So if that spills over into lower-level races, the question people we don't know the answer to is the women's response a response to a Trump candidacy that many find really appalling, or is it a response to the Republican Party, and therefore they're going to punish Republicans lower down on the ticket? And I think you've seen in Balderson's ads, I think Stephanie Kunze's, at least TV ads, you'd be hard pressed, especially with Stephanie, to say, oh, she's a Trump loyalist. She has declared her, in a very subtle way, has declared her independence. So I think that's one of the things we're not sure about.
Stephanie Kunze
Biden might do very well among women. Does that have a coattail effects?
Stephanie Kunze is a running state senator from the western part of Franklin County, running for re-election in the Ohio State Senate. Jesse Balmer, Elena Shearer has been a lot of her ads and literature has focused on the Affordable Care Act. That's been a Democratic strategy throughout, especially since the Supreme Court vacancy opened up, and not surprising she's trying to hammer that issue in her campaign.
Yeah, I think it's an issue that Democrats regularly go back to. So it's not unique to this particular election cycle, but you heard it in 2018 as well. It was an argument that Danny O'Connor made, and that was unsuccessful for him too. So we'll see. But obviously concerns about access to healthcare are something that really hits home, especially in the middle of coronavirus, where a lot of people's healthcare was tied to their work. If they're not working, that presents some challenges.
Mike Gonidakis, Troy Balderson is touting the economy. He wants to make the economy stronger after the pandemic passes. He's not fully embracing Donald Trump, but he's not really giving him a stiff arm either. He's just running more or less as a traditional conservative Republican representing, largely a rural district.
Yeah, it's a winning message. He supports the president. He doesn't oppose him. And I think depending on where he is in the district, he might tweak that, go a little bit farther right or more to the middle, depending if he's in parts of northern Franklin County. But, Troy has a good record to run on. He's in the minority right now, so it's hard to say he's done a lot of specific things. But indeed, his message, it plays well, because if you look at his district, it's not just, northern Franklin County, Delaware County, it goes into rural Ohio, too, out to the east. So, it would, as Herb said earlier, Professor Asher said, it would take a very commanding Biden performance in that district for Troy to be unsuccessful.
Two questions follow up, Mike. It seems like, talk about trying to represent two districts, the Zanesville part, which is rural and more conservative, and the suburban part, which is, northeastern Columbus into Licking County. You can see it in how Troy Balderson treats masks. You know, his TV spots don't have masks, but social media, he's got masks. I mean, is he pro-mask or anti-mask, or does it matter which part of the district he happens to be looking for votes?
I would say Troy knows how to play to his audience really well, depending on where he.
On a more serious note, there is a Libertarian candidate in this race, Jon Stewart, and there's some talk that he might hurt Troy Balderson. Will the Libertarian candidate be a factor? He's an environmentalist Libertarian candidate, let's put it that way. Mike.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult analysis to do without getting into the weeds. But if it pulls from anyone, it would probably pull from Troy. I think Libertarians tend to vote more Republican than they do Democrat, and if the candidate's able to garner any traction, I think it would hurt Troy.
All right, let's get to our final topic. The Ohio Supreme Court had not been getting a lot of attention from voters or the media in recent weeks, but it has gotten the attention of the man who helped put George W. Bush in the White House. Karl Rove is helping raise money for Republican incumbent Judith French. French and her fellow Republican Sharon Kennedy face challenges from Democrats Jennifer Brunner and John O'Donnell. In an email to potential donors, Rove says he is re-electing French to help Republicans redraw legislative districts next year. Herb Asher, you fought many a fight over drawing legislative districts. This is really a key issue in this race.
Yeah, although presumably we will have a new process in place, and this process will work so well that we will never have to even get to the Ohio Supreme Court. And you might ask, well, what have I been drinking in saying that? But what's interesting is that 2 years ago, when the Republicans swept all the statewide administrative offices, and they lost the 2 Republican-held Supreme Court seats, and they vowed, we're not going to let this happen again. We sort of overlooked those. And of course, these 2 seats are so important because if the Democrats could repeat their performance, they would then control the Supreme Court by a 4-3 margin. So I think we're seeing, certainly the political operatives, the business community, a whole variety of interested parties, not the average citizen per se, who are now actually becoming very aware that this may be the most significant set of elections on the Ohio ballot, even though the presidency really is. But so I think we're going to see a lot of efforts in the last week, and try to remind on the Republican side, you need to vote for Supreme Court. Obviously the court doesn't have a party label by it, but the parties are certainly. I've gotten 3 Democratic sample ballots already that featured the Democratic candidates for Supreme Court. So this is a very significant issue. And for the Democrats, if they could win the 2 seats, that would be actually the first sort of major success they've really had in state politics since who knows when.
Jesse Balmert, based on the number of dollars being spent on this race from the parties and outside groups, I don't think they're as optimistic as Herb is that the redistricting fix that we have approved will be as successful as Herb might think it is. And Jesse, the name ID game, we've seen it before in this race, but I'm not sure it's as big a factor this time. First, we have really good Irish names running against each other, Kennedy and O'Donnell. Jennifer Brunner and Judith French both have very good name ID. It's just going to be, do voters know which party these judges belong to?
Yeah, and I think both Republicans and Democrats are going to try very hard and are spending a lot of money to make sure you know which party they belong to. So that's the one factor. But to Herb's point, this new process for drawing the lines for both the state house districts and the congressional districts, it's still starting with the legislature. And the legislature is almost certainly going to be controlled by Republicans still, perhaps not a supermajority, but they're going to control both the House and the Senate. That's expected. And so for Democrats, they see this Ohio Supreme Court as the only backstop against a map that maybe they're not excited about. So we shall see. Obviously, 2 races, it's hard to pick up both.
Mike Gonadakis, just 30 seconds. How confident are you that voters will see past the lack of ID and vote the Republicans back in?
Well, Mike, in 2006, I ran both Bob Cupp and Terrence O'Donnell's campaign for the Ohio Supreme Court. So I know a few things, and we never got the attention back then that they're getting today. And I think French and Kennedy are going to be successful. But it's not because the voters know. I think it's a coordinated effort. It's name ID. It's all name ID for these judges. You don't. There was a debate a week or so ago, and I didn't even know about it. But at the end of the day, I think the business community, the chambers, is putting a lot of effort in to ensure our two incumbents get elected. But it's unfortunate because the role of a judge isn't that of a legislature. So we're treating the court as if they're another branch. They are the third branch of government, but they're not the legislative branch. And so whoever wins, I hope they call balls and strikes.
Well, maybe we shouldn't elect them. Oh, that's all right. That's a different story. Off the record comments. Let's start with you, Mike Gonidakis, really quick tonight.
Yeah, lame duck. I'm predicting is going to be a tsunami of bills headed to the governor's desk with our new speaker, Bob Cupp, and Larry Ophoff working so well together. You're going to see a lot of activity in lame duck.
Nuke bailouts number one?
Maybe not.
Okay. Herb Asher, you're up.
I've changed my prediction when I heard earlier on the show that the president is coming to Circleville. And so there will now be a market in great pumpkin jokes. And we should have a contest to see who can come up with the best joke, and we'll all have a good laugh and ease some of the tension that we're all facing.
I bet many a jack-o'-lanterns looking like Trump in Circleville. Jesse Balmer, last off-the-record comment.
I am very excited for the return of Big Ten football and the Buckeyes, and I just hope everyone can enjoy the game, but not spread COVID at the same time.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how bars. Now, OSU has done a really good job in keeping the positivity rate down. It's down less than 2%. We'll see how that turns out after Saturday. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online, WOSU.org. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. Follow us there. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week. Stay apart. Stay safe.